I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you so much for joining us on a very busy month. I know everyone must be wrapping up, getting ready for the winter break, looking forward to some much deserved time to rest, recharge, relax. We appreciate you coming here. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to our Montessori Town Halls. We host these every single week. They're every Thursday throughout the school year from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern. It's a free space for Montessori school leaders to come together and just find a sense of support online. We know it's lonely at the top, but it's important to have just some time to connect with other school leaders, ask important school leadership questions, and also hear from some incredible thought leaders in the Montessori space. Luckily, we are part of a community that's very generous and willing to share their expertise and time with one another. So welcome. If you have any questions throughout the meeting, please feel free to use the chat. We'll keep an eye on that. Also, we're, I believe, going live on our Facebook as well. So if you have any questions and you're joining us on Facebook, feel free to comment in the live video as well. We'll be looking at those questions as well. But welcome. I'm going to introduce our speaker today, who is Cynthia Barraza. She is an AMS School Quality Manager, and she serves as a guide and support to all schools in the AMS pathway of continuous school improvement. We're really fortunate to have her here today to talk about creating a culture of whole school improvement. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Cynthia so she can share her presentation with us. Oh, I think you're muted, Cynthia.
I was trying to be very quiet when you were talking, and now so yeah, thank you for inviting me. I think then I've been part of this community for I was a head of school before, and I know the wealth of knowledge that is shared here. So I'm totally honored to share that now on this other side. So thank you for joining me. And yeah, like Camila was saying, I'll share a little bit of how creating that culture of whole school improvement. So let me just share my screen so that we can go ahead and start. Are we seeing the same screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just want to confirm. So yeah, so I think then to start, like she was saying, so I'll just introduce a little bit more of why am I here? What am I talking about this topic today? So my Montessori journey started many years ago as a teacher, as many of you probably have. And I started in the elementary classrooms, and then I taught also early childhood, and I think then eventually I trickled into the administrative side, and really understanding that whatever happens in the administration also needs to be in conjunction to what our Montessori pedagogy is. That is not, we're not going to administer the school as if it was maybe a factory, and then try to introduce this part of Montessori only in the classroom. The Montessori pedagogy needs to happen everywhere. And so that was where my passion kind of ended up happening. So I led a school and started a school and led it for the past 12 years. And then I trickle into AMS, where I lead and serve there as the school quality manager. And so very excited to share this topic with everyone, and hopefully we can make it as a conversation. So if there is any questions, there will be a couple pieces where I will want to ask you. So if there is questions or comments that you have, you feel free to put them in the chat. So that's a little bit about me, but I would love to hear kind of where is people coming from, like where do you connect, like maybe your state, your city, and what kind of role you have within the school. So if you don't mind just sharing it in the chat, I guess also I would love to hear who's here joining us. Okay. I see someone from Seattle, and then Connecticut and St. Paul. And I see someone that is an interim head of school. Welcome to the group. For sure, I have to say that in those difficult times, this group has been a great resource. So make sure that you stay connected. Then New Hampshire and California. So thank you for sharing, and it's always nice to see where you're coming from. So welcome. So to start, let's get back to the core. I think that many times I like starting these conversations with what did Maria Montessori left us, and I thought that this quote kind of really spoke to the leaders that we are. So it says, "Those who direct others must themselves be transformed. No one can ever be a leader or a guide who has not prepared for that work." So of course she was talking about the teacher, but I will say leader also includes the administrator, right? Back in her day, the schools looked a little bit different than what our schools look like now. So it is our duty to get ourselves prepared. So you're here for an hour of a little bit of preparing. So kudos on you for that commitment. So when we talk about continuous improvement, I usually think of something like this, like a path, something that I can walk through, that it might not be straight. There's some hills, there's some ups and downs, but that there's a path to where I want to continue that improvement. So we will go back to this visual in a little bit, but this is kind of a visual for you to kind of start thinking of what we're talking. So to start, continuous improvement, what is it? Why do we as schools, do we want to be thinking about continuous improvement? And really, other industries have this term and use this term kind of very liberally, and there is plenty of research around it. So, and of course in the education industry also, but there is, so I kind of blended some of these definitions so that we can discuss them today. So one of those definitions will be continuous improvement is the seeking of small improvements in processes and products with the objective of increasing quality and reducing waste. And this is something that it came from the manufacturing area. Of course, they want to make sure that there's no waste of raw material and that the quality is good so that the items that we end up buying, they work, right? Then this other version of continuous improvement definition is an ongoing cycle of positive change and employee involvement. This comes from like an HR kind of related industry. And of course, HR talks about employees, right? The engagement of those employees and the cycle of positive change. But, and then let's one more, and we want to explore. And this one is the continuous improvement is based upon the belief that there's continuous improvement can be brought about by a never-ending series of small changes. So a couple of, as we read these, there's a couple of terms probably that are already coming up that you have heard, or that you have probably used also in the education and Montessori talks. So let's do So in the continuous improvement in the education side, so these were definitions from other interest rates. But in the education side, we have been a little bit slower in the research of or implementation also of that continuous improvement. And I will say that the whole school continuous improvement, because sometimes it's applied for a couple of programs, but then that whole school. I know that that's kind of like the efforts that we're all together taking. And the why, what is happening, like why do we have not used this much in our schools, is because sometimes this work is often done in silos. So maybe your primary classrooms are doing this wonderful program and they have these goals in mind, but then maybe your elementary classrooms and the goals that they have for the kids are different and they don't connect. Then also that policy demands quick results. Like we as administrators or even our stakeholders, maybe like parents and if you are in the public sector, maybe the district, we want quick results. And as we know, with Montessori and anything else that is a sustainable change, it's going to take time. So it's not something that you can implement and then tomorrow we get the immediate change and results. The data is also not as frequent, or sometimes we don't have meaningful data, or we don't know what to do with the data that we have so that we can really make those slight changes that need to happen. And then also that when there is failures of that system within our school, there's a lot of focus on the failure, but not in focus into the system. Sometimes a failure of one classroom or one kid or one teacher, or even of the whole school, means that there's a system that is not functioning. So we need to reflect and see what's going on and not just put our focus into one of the activities that is not working. So let's do here a little bit of activity. So I will put again those definitions that we had that I read minutes ago. And let's see if there's any Montessori terms or definitions that you see that pop up and that come to mind as you read this. So if you want, either type on the chat, or I don't know, Camila, if there's a way that we can unmute anyone that raises their hand. Yes, she's saying yes. So if you're comfortable for raising your hand and talking, or just type in the chat, and I will put them back here. They're back here. So what terms do you see there that you also used, or that we also used in Montessori? The chat up. I cannot see everyone. There you go. Nothing. Yeah. Well, hopefully you at least saw some, even though you were not comfortable to share. But then, so I did for sure saw some of those. So let's go and explore some of those here. So in this first definition, there are small improvements, and don't we expect for the child to do small improvements, progressive small improvements into the curriculum, the materials that they're seeing, they're manipulating. Also, I think of the teachers that as they are trained in the training centers, we do not expect them that day one to their graduation, they have been absolutely transformed. It's a process of small improvements and small discoveries. And even, I will say that even ourselves as administrators. So the first day, the first month, the first year that you are in a leadership position will be very different than your third and your fifth as you come into that cycle of the school. So those small improvements come from every direction. Then there's also a focus on progress, just out of the focus on the process will change the product. So that's also something that we focus, right? We focus on the process that the child has, not the product. And yes, as we see this whole school system, we want to focus on that product, but not forgetting the process of how, because that's really where the continuous improvement happens. Okay, then our second one, continuous improvement, is an ongoing cycle. And we talked about that everywhere, that we talk about a work cycle that the child is doing in the classroom, that cycle of within the mornings that they have, the cycle of their 3 years that they remain in the classroom. And like I was saying, the cycle of us also as teachers and administrators. So talking about that. And then the positive change. And I think that the change is always there, but then the part of the positive is that we focus on that positive, that there's going to be changes, but that we always have that positive mindset on finding those positive pieces and seeing the child, the teacher, or the administrator that it's not there yet. And then for that last one, the never-ending series of small changes. So again, this is a progressive piece that or cycle that where changes will go small but incremental. So if you think about all of these ones together, you can see some commonalities on our pedagogy. So the other, as I was putting this together, I just really researched continuous improvement and Montessori. And really, there's a lot of similarities. I will say even that Montessori is based on continuous improvement. We just don't call it like that, right? Because we observe, we self-reflect, we apply whatever we think that needs to happen, and then we go back to observing. So we are doing that continuous improvement within the pedagogy. And so now it's how do we put it everywhere? That it's happening in our administrative side, that is happening in our board, that is happening in our classrooms for sure, that is happening within our parent organization. So that's the how, or the hope that we start seeing that. So remember this visual that we had of that never-ending winding road. So after these definitions, I will want to kind of entertain the idea that instead of this path of just continuous being straight, yes, winding up and down, but that is more of a cyclical staircase, that you will have to come back and ask the same question and reflect on the same topic, but it might not be in the same level as maybe in 3 years as an administrator. You will be in a different stage. So your reflection will be deeper. So, but then that we don't forget that we need to come back to the same spot and the same reflection again and again. And that's what really continuous improvement is. And just having that mindset of we need to do it again and again and again, just like we do it in the classroom. We don't just observe once and close the book and think that the child will learn or that will become the great graduate from our school. We observe again and again, and we implement 1 and 2 and 3 and many skills. So this is the mindset of continuous improvement within our schools. So having that, hopefully that kind of started your wheels turning, but then there needs to be some kind of framework for some of you that you are trained in the Montessori method. Maybe you know how to do this cycle of observation, reflection, action, and then observation again. But then once you're talking about a whole school, it gets a lot more complicated, right? We're not just seeing one piece, one classroom, one laboratory, which I like to see that classroom. You're seeing the whole school, and the whole school has many classrooms, many teachers, many kids, parents. So then a framework will help you kind of see where to start and guide you how to do this work. So a framework is really there to help the organizations just figure out the systems and what are you needing to work on, which things are you doing good, which places you need growth, and then just a self-reflection on what the whole school is doing. So this is just one definition from it, but that's what the framework is. It's the tool, is the how. So then I'll talk about some Montessori specific frameworks that I know. And of course, this is a town hall. So if there is more that the community has, please share, and I'll have a open time for questions and of course conversations. So the ones that come to mind for Montessori specific frameworks for this continuous improvement, there will be, of course, AMI and the American Montessori Society, AMS, have frameworks that help you evaluate and have those questions. And the AMI organization is that school recognition, and then in the AMS is the pathway of continuous improvement, which will give you, take you to accreditation. And then if you are in the public sector, there's the National Center of Montessori in the public sector, which they have that essential element review. And these 3 organizations have tools in this framework for you to be able to evaluate and self-reflect. And they all are based on the same core components of Montessori. Regardless of the differences that these 3 organizations have, the 3 are focusing their framework into the 5 core components of Montessori. So I'll just kind of go over them quickly, because I think that sometimes there's more things to bring us together than our differences. So these are 5 things that you really want to be reflecting on, like what am I doing? And all of these 3 associations, they have standards that will guide you to see, am I really putting Montessori into action based on what those standards are. So one of them is, and probably the most important one, is those trained teachers, the adult that is part of that classroom, that triangle of child, the adult, and the environment. Those trained teachers need to be there. And of course, every framework has different standards for sure, but then they're all seeking that Montessori trained adult that is there to implement the pedagogy. Then there's the multi-age classrooms. Of course, there's ranges for the toddler and infant, the 3 to 6 for the primary, the elementary. There's different ways that you can have them. But then if you are looking at Montessori and applying Montessori pedagogy, then there needs to be that 3-year cycle in whichever definition you have it. Then materials, of course, you need to have materials in your schools. I know that a couple of our organizations have lists that you can use as guides, but then it wouldn't be a classroom without those tools, which of course, if your teachers are trained, they will be looking for them and asking for them. So that's why I think many times that piece of our trained individuals put it in a highlight. The child-directed work, you can have all of these wonderful pieces of materials and tools and still be teaching everyone at the same time, or doing assigning work to everyone every day. I know that those are skills that the child needs to get. It will be, child-directed work will be different in every area of development, but it needs to be there. And then the uninterrupted work period or work cycle. So these are pieces that every Montessori focus framework will be looking at, regardless if it's AMS, AMI, or if it's the public sector. These 5 are the core components that we all need to be looking at, and really looking at framework for how do we compare, how are we doing this for these 4 elements within our schools. And so one of these frameworks is really, once you get into looking at the whole school, then is school accreditation. And a school accreditation it's not for every school for sure, but it could be for yours. I think that sometimes we get a little scared, like, oh, accreditation, there's going to be a lot of work. But then it's really the hard work that we need to be doing, right? The hard work of our school, it's that one, the one for the one that the administrator gets involved. Yeah. Okay. And then, so once you get into accreditation, there are a couple pieces that you're going to be looking. So it goes beyond the 5 core components. It goes into really what are you teaching and learning within the school? What are you documenting? How are you using the results? How are your outcomes, right? What are you? So it goes really deeper into the school functioning. And that's where, when you, this could help your school, your primary program, your toddler program, your elementary program, to really get into this whole school, have those conversations on how are we doing these pieces, and how can we get any of the holes that we have between our programs, how can we pull them out? How can we do that? So it starts with that conversation, but then the school accreditation or any of these frameworks will give you the tools to start that conversation. So I encourage you to start kind of reaching out and seeing what kind of tool am I going to be working with, so that I can start having these conversations with my program. Then some of these accreditation frameworks. We'll go even deeper into the administrative pieces. So the things that you do in every day, probably, I'm sure that we're all looking into our mission and vision and who's our governance, if you're a nonprofit, if you're a for-profit, how does that happen? I know in the last couple of years, personnel has been an issue of how do we recruit, how do we train, how do we maintain our staff and that they're here for many years to go. And then our facilities, our finances. And I think that these pieces of self-reflection will help you also. The past couple of years have been very stressful for us, as a whole, as a world. But then having these pieces of self-reflection and systems that work will get you through crisis moments. So if you have all of these systems that work, it will be easier to go through these moments. Because yes, the last 2 years was a pandemic. Who knows what comes after? And we want we all want every school to be there. So that's kind of like where I get passionate about this kind of work, so that the schools remain and there's more, of course. Okay, so we know what continuous improvement is, or at least we defined it, and how it connects with Montessori. And I will say how Montessori is really continuous improvement. And then this couple of frameworks that you have. And of course, there is non-Montessori specific frameworks or accreditations that you can seek, and that will help with this part of the administrative part. Of course, I haven't seen any outside the organizations that go deep into looking at the Montessori method, just because that's not what their expertise does. But I think that even if you decided, well, maybe there's a regional organization that has great standards that I can use, looking into those administrative standards will help you and help your school kind of have those systems that will help you do your job and do it more efficiently. So it doesn't need to be just the Montessori focus frameworks. There are many others that you can tap. Then, so you have this framework, you go through this wonderful self-reflection and you want to engage, but then this is a continuous thing. You need to maintain it, right? It's not just a year that you're going to be doing this work, or 2 years. That it's a commitment to really hone in and put it into your school culture. So a couple of tips about this, how to implement it. So there's always some kind of cost, right, regarding these pieces. Either I need to be a membership, or I need to submit my application, or I need to host a visitor, I need to have a consultant to visit every so many years. So I will suggest always to have something in your budget, a line that it has to do with that continuous improvement, either whatever you want to call it, accreditation, you can put it as continuous improvement, but that there's always something, even if it's if you say right now, our school is in such a low numbers, $100, $200, wherever you want to start, but that is, you start to get in that habit that there's always going to be something there that we're going to commit it to this continuous improvement. It could be for professional development or for train your teachers. That is always something. So that's one of our the usage that you can have for those, that budget. Maybe you want to train more teachers or support them. Maybe there's a membership, there's an accreditation, there's an affiliation fee, or a recognition fee. There is, so that you always have that in mind. Then also, if you decide to go into the accreditation side, it doesn't need, like, yes, of course, the cash that comes out, your cash flow needs to come at once, but then you can also amortize it through the years that the accreditation is valid. So that will help your bottom line. So there's ways that you can make this happen. Then also, you can have the money, but then you don't have the time. So it's really making that commitment and really having time within your school calendar. So I know that coming at January 2023, we will all be looking into new calendars and new budgets. So I invite you to entertain this idea. What are we doing in this continuous improvement? So putting that time within your school for, it could be professional development time for you as the administrator, for your teachers, and maybe just something that is more geared to this process. Maybe it's not any more training on observation for you, but training on what this whole school systems are. Maybe that's so foreign for you. That's what I'm talking about. And then time for self-study and self-reflection time, from your teachers to your board to your, of course, your administrative team. I will say even sometimes your parents. Why not to include them in that self-reflection that sets the culture that is, we all do this work. And then more emphasizing, and that's why in a separate slide, commit to the work. That this is the work that is easy to put it on the project, on the back burner, and the one that we will start once we have everyone trained. You don't need to wait. We will start when the building is, and we have our own building. We will start. We can always have a million things to have excuses about it. So just commit to the work, even if it's a few the time and little the budget. Commit to that work. And then create spaces for your self-care, because there's no way that there's continuous improvement if you as an administrator is worn out, drained. Of course, if you're worn, your teachers are, and everyone else behind it. So I always, when I was and leading a school, I always try to be the role model for the teachers, as in the adult in the classroom. So I can assure you that if you take that time and that space, and it doesn't need to be much time, just a space for you, then the teachers will appreciate, and really you will be able to give more to them, and just be there, be more present, and really think about continuous improvement, because this is the hard work. This is the work of kind of like the golden beads of the primary student, the one that this is our administrator, big work. Let's not be in practical life all the time. Let's come into the big conversations. So I will like right now to open it for questions or conversation, really. If there is any, I would love to hear that. If there is any comments, or if there's any other, for sure, if there's any other frameworks or accreditation that you think that it could be helpful for the group to know about, that'll be wonderful.
Any advice on your accreditation journey as well, if you went through the process and saw it through from start to finish, or perhaps maybe you joined into a school that already had an accreditation and then it was up to you to make sure that those standards were maintained. Any advice for that? Is anyone here from a school that is looking to get accredited or isn't accredited yet, but you're looking at your options and seeing what steps you have to take to get there? Or are we all from accredited schools?
We have a quiet crowd.
Emily here says she's AMI accredited in her school. I know the processes for AMI and AMS are slightly different. Jennifer says AMS accredited. So no one here is not accredited.
That's great.
Oh, Natasha says my school is not.
So what, for those of you that are heads of school of accredited schools, what do you think have been the benefits within your role to go through that process? So that the ones that are not can see. What will I do all of that work? It's hard work for sure.
For those of you who are not accredited, do any of you have like a Montessori trained guides or trained teachers in your classrooms who are bringing in their experiences and expertise?
See a hand up. Mary Lou.
Yeah, Cynthia, that was a great presentation. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, the school that I ran for 45 years was accredited and is currently through the Association Montessori International, so AMI. But I also serve on a commission for the Connecticut State Accreditation Agency. So I would just comment on the value, and which I think you've laid out very well, and Cynthia, but to be a member of CAIS, Connecticut Association of Independent Schools, it requires a huge, even bigger than AMI and AMS. I've been familiar with both. It's a 10-year accreditation process. So what I mean by that is every 10 years, a school is asked to reflect on everything. They have what are now 14 standards. And the standards start with the mission and the vision, which you just talked about the importance of, but then it goes into governance, and then it will go into actually, diversity, justice, and inclusion has become a new standard through CAIS. And by the way, it's affiliated with NAIS, National Association of Independent Schools. And then it goes on into program, curriculum, teachers. And so there are 14 standards. Finances is a big one. Governance is a big one. And what the indicators are that we have really has you reflect on how is your school set up for sustainability? Are you looking at existence from year to year, or are you thinking for the next 100 years or more? And obviously we want to think of our schools as lasting much longer. So I also recommend that process, but I would certainly begin with your affiliate, whether it be AMS or AMI. I would begin there, and generally for AMI, that's an every 3 year, and it requires also a visitation from a team of experienced Montessorians. For the CAIS, I, for example, am leading a team to look at a school in April, and putting together a team of 6 people. And we will have received a full in-depth, and I mean in-depth, report on the answers to the 14 standards that are huge. This document, it can be as many as 50, 60 pages. That'll just give you a sense, typed. And then we review the document, and then we go in, and we will be there for 3 days interviewing the head of school, the administrative team, the faculty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not with the intent of changing them, but actually looking at whether they are doing what they say they do. Are they committed, as you said, committed to the work? And so I just wanted to mention, I think the relevance and importance of this is to elevate ourselves. I started a school with just 9 children, but it grew and grew and grew. So it is a process, and it was part of my learning curve. I had to learn how to do some of this for sure. I didn't have all that knowledge, but what I discovered is, or what my goal was, the importance of really establishing an institution that would live well beyond me. And that's hopefully everyone's goal. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that valuable insight. Yeah, and just seeing it that there's other associations that and I by state, by region, then they will be able. And yes, that self-reflection and those reports that you talk about, they're lengthy and in depth. That's what I was talking, that it's really our big work as administrators and as leaders of those schools. And I think that I love your emphasis on our schools need to be set up for sustainability. That they're there, even though when we are gone from there, that they're there for the next one and the next one and the next one, and hopefully for many children. That's the goal.
That's right.
To affect many children. Yeah.
There's a comment here in the chat from Natasha, who mentioned a little bit earlier that their school is not accreditation, but she and her AD are certified, and one other guide. Every other guide is finishing up their practicum this year, and she would love to know the hardest part of the accreditation process.
The hardest part, I will say, that self-study. You know, the really putting the work of comparing your school into each standard, and just how do you meet it, how do you not, or making a plan on how to meet the standard. I think that, but then also it shouldn't be just you and your assistant. It should be a whole community evaluation. So people from your governance committees, from your parents, teachers, it's really a whole school evaluation and self-reflection. So having in mind that you're the leader of it, but then bringing everyone into the conversation. Sometimes that could be at least I know that as me as an administrator, sometimes I get frustrated, a little like antsy when people are coming into the conversation and they're maybe not doing things as quickly as they need to be, but really having that patience, and that this is a whole school duty and project. I don't know what other, those of you that have accredited, what has been the hardest part that have that you have gone through the accreditation part?
I would just say I agree with you. It's pulling everybody together is really hard. And part of it is everyone's so busy, aren't they? And they're working so hard. But for a real true accreditation, it's sort of, if you will, starting out the year or sometimes 2 years in advance and really reflecting on every aspect of your school. If you're going for a big state accreditation, if it's for AMI, I can't speak to AMS, but for AMI, you really have a lot of questions you have to answer about the program, the numbers of students, your admissions process, and so on. So again, it's that commitment, and some schools, I mean, the head of school can't do it all. So some schools will ask for a volunteer or deputize someone to take on the leadership of, and I would recommend this, by the way, if you feel overworked and ready to collapse, turn to someone you value and ask if they would be willing to take it on, in the sense of really receiving all the information, calling the meetings, having people divide up it's the dividing of the work, and then making sure that it's done, according to schedules and that sort of thing. So I agree with you. I think it's a whole school process, but very often it ends up on the head's shoulders. And it shouldn't really. It will be better for the school if everybody were involved.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because then on top of that, you need to do everything else that happens in the school.
I'm curious to know if in your experience working in schools now, are parents asking questions a lot more about accreditation? I certainly know at my time working I used to work at an AMI Montessori. It was really not common knowledge. This was a few years ago. I'm curious to know if there are more questions now in the parent community about accreditation. Is there more awareness for it? Is there more pressure for schools to get certain types of accreditation? Is that something that you all are observing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Camilla. We'll love to hear from everyone.
You can comment yes or no in the chat, just based on your experience.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Forgot to do that. I know that about one thing that I have seen since joining this role is just there's some areas of our in our country, I guess, that I guess there's more knowledge for accreditation, and their parents really are driving that conversation. But then there's some not as much. That's what I've seen.
I was at this AMI school about 5 years ago, and it was in Houston, but more in the suburban area. And we were really doing the work of educating families about accreditation. A lot of them didn't know. We had a few who were very, very aware about what accreditation was. But here, Marnie says it's a question asked by our prospective. It is a question asked by our prospective parents. Okay.
Good.
All right. Any other last minute questions? I guess we've got 5 minutes, but oh, here Marnie says they may not know what it means or entails. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that, yes, that's part of what we're seeing. I think that we're still in some areas, like I said, probably not in Houston. Like maybe Houston is one that maybe they know there's plenty of Montessori schools and the method is known, but there's probably some places that we're still like just educating about the method and the pedagogy. And maybe that's the next step of doing. Yeah.
Any other last minute questions for Cynthia, or just in general about accreditation, or whole school improvement before we go off?
Well, I'll put my email in the chat. If anyone is has any other questions, comments, I would love to connect. I really love this kind of connections and town halls. So happy to converse if there's any farther conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And thank you for everyone for joining. Hopefully you got some great insights on your school accreditation journey or on your whole school improvement journey. We'll be back with our town halls next year. So we'll let you guys have a restful winter break. And I know this last week before schools kind of go out for winter is busy, and you guys might have some celebrations depending on where you are. But enjoy your winter break. Hopefully it's a great time to recharge, rest, relax, and connect with family. We'll be back on January 5th with our next town hall. We hope to see you guys there, and we'll be here every Thursday from throughout the school year next year. So hope to see you guys there. Thank you to Cynthia, and thank you for everyone for joining.
Thank you so much, everyone, have a happy holidays for everyone.
Thank you.
Happy holidays. Thank you all.
Happy holidays.
Bye.